What makes this period, 2024-2025, uniquely transformative? Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're really getting into some fascinating, maybe even unsettling recent history. We're looking at Karl's big book, Trump's Return, the campaign that changed America. I mean, just that title, right? The campaign that changed America. It's a massive claim. So our job today isn't just to recap the election, it's to unpack why Karl, a seasoned reporter, thinks this was, a fundamental turning point, a structural shift. What's the evidence he brings?
Exactly. That subtitle sets the stage. He's not just telling the story of how a former president got back in, he's arguing the effects are much, much bigger, potentially reshaping American governance for years. We need to look closely at the specifics he uses to back up that, monumental claim.
And a big part of his argument rests on his access, doesn't it? He says he was in the room or close to it for key moments. He uses that reporting to offer supposedly fresh details on how this wasn't just politics as usual.
Right. That insider perspective is positioned as the key strength. We're promised to look behind the curtain at the mechanics of this return to power and the beginnings of its impact.
Okay, so when you actually read the book, Karl sets it up for maximum impact. He traces the comeback trail, sure, but the real focus seems to be the behind-the-scenes stuff. Campaign strategy meetings, transition planning.
Yes, the internal dynamics. He argues these weren't just about winning the election, but about preparing for, large-scale changes after inauguration. Less about the rallies, more about mapping out control of the federal government.
And the political backdrop he paints is pretty volatile. He spends a lot of time on the shock around Joe Biden stepping back.
Right, the withdrawal and the sort of chaotic feel of that campaign moment, he frames that as a critical opening.
Then there's the Kamala Harris campaign, which he portrays as, highlighting the intense polarization that defined the whole race.
And Karl connects these events. He suggests they weren't just isolated incidents, but factors that created the pressure, the environment, where these bigger structural shifts he talks about could actually take root.
But then he zooms in on something really dramatic, the assassination attempts. He doesn't just mention them, he frames them as absolutely pivotal.
He really does. He treats them as more than just horrific events or security lapses. He argues they were genuine watershed moments, politically and even structurally, for the campaign itself.
How so structurally?
Well, Karl suggests the trauma and the intense security focus afterwards fundamentally altered how the campaign operated. He reports that decision-making circles got much tighter, much faster.
So less about traditional vetting, more about who you could absolutely trust.
Exactly. He argues it accelerated this reliance on perceived personal loyalty over, say, deep experience or diverse viewpoints. That need for unwavering trust, born from trauma, started shaping the team that would eventually plan the transition. It became very insular very quickly.
Okay, but let's push back on that insider access claim for a second. Being in the room sounds great, but doesn't it also mean you might just be getting the official story, the narrative they want you to hear?
That's a really fair point. How do we know it's the real mechanics and not just, the winner's spin? Well, Karl tries to get ahead of this. He actually includes a section where he reflects on his own reporting, admitting he'd previously thought a comeback was, frankly, pretty unlikely.
Oh, interesting. So he's saying I was skeptical too.
Kind of. By showing his own earlier doubts and explaining why he changed his mind based on what he saw internally, the sheer organization of the effort he's trying to bolster his credibility, he's essentially saying the evidence of this planned structural change convinced even him. And that organized effort is what we should probably look at next.
Right. Let's shift from the campaign drama to the deliberate operational changes Karl details. He spends a lot of time on Trump's inner circle, these absolute loyalists.
Yes, the core team.
And their stated goal, according to Karl, wasn't just policy wins. It was, and this is his term, implementing a new world order. That sounds dramatic.
It does, and Karl argues it wasn't just rhetoric. He connects it to concrete plans aimed at fundamentally reshaping the Republican Party, yes, but more importantly, the actual machinery of government.
So what does New World Order or structural shift mean in practical terms, based on his reporting? What are the nuts and bolts?
Okay, this is where Karl provides some real specifics. A key example he dives into is the planning around Schedule F.
Right, the executive order concept to reclassify federal employees.
Exactly. The idea was to potentially strip job protections from thousands of civil servants, making them easier to fire if they were seen as obstacles and easier to replace with people deemed loyal.
So, not just changing the Secretary of State, but changing potentially thousands of mid-level people across agencies.
That's the core idea Karl presents. He cites internal discussions suggesting this wasn't just an idle threat, but part of a meticulously planned overhaul, often linked to broader initiatives like Project 2025. This, he argues, was the mechanism for locking in long-term change, controlling the personnel inside the bureaucracy.
That distinction feels important. It's not just about policy direction, it's about changing the operating system of government itself. It makes that structural shift claim feel less abstract, more concrete.
Precisely. And underpinning this whole effort, Karl says, is this powerful theme of retribution.
The idea of settling scores.
Yes, but maybe more than just settling scores. It's framed as dismantling institutions perceived as disloyal or obstructive, and using that retribution narrative as the driving force, the political energy for these deep changes. Karl presents it not just as campaign talk, but as the central organizing principle for the incoming administration.
But hang on, isn't every new administration, especially one coming in after being out of power, looking to change direction and, well, put their people in place? What makes this period, 2024-2025, uniquely transformative in Karl's view, compared to Reagan in 81, maybe, or the changes after 9/11?
That's the crux of his argument, isn't it? He contends the difference lies in the scale and specificity of the pre-planning, which was aimed not just at reversing policies like, say, environmental rules, but at neutralizing the institutions themselves, the career staff, the internal checks and balances.
So targeting the process, not just the outcome.
Kind of. He quotes sources suggesting the goal was to preempt bureaucratic resistance before it could even form, thereby ensuring changes would stick. He emphasizes the focus of this loyalist team on specific administrative procedures, personnel lists, legal interpretations, suggesting a level of detailed institutional targeting that he argues is unprecedented in modern times.
Okay, so if Karl's right, what you, the listener, need to grasp is that this period, 2024-2025, isn't just another transition. It's presented as the foundational work for potentially a decade or more of altered American politics, a genuine attempt at transformation, fueled by this rhetoric of retribution.
Now, given how huge these claims are, and let's be honest, the politically charged nature of it all, we absolutely need to step back and apply some critique. We talked about the insider access.
Right, the double-edged sword.
Exactly. Being in the room gives you texture, anecdotes, maybe even scoops, but it also means you're potentially seeing a curated version of reality.
A story they want told.
Precisely. So the crucial caveat is, access isn't objectivity. Karl got deep access, which is valuable, but we have to remember the perspective might be skewed towards the goals and justifications of the people granting that access. The details on Schedule F planning are interesting, sure, but the conclusion that it represents an inevitable structural shift that might be influenced by the sources.
And it's the timing issue too, right?
Yeah.
The book came out in late 2025.
Yes, that's a big one.
He's describing the plans, the initial moves, the intentions, but the really long-term structural effects that changed America, part of the title, it might just be too early to tell.
It really might. Judging how truly transformative these changes are, whether they'll stick, whether they'll be reversed, that takes time. The administration was only about a year old when the book hit shelves.
So is Karl documenting history as it happens, or is he making a very bold, very early call? Is it history or just really high-stakes journalism at this point?
It's probably a bit of both, but its immediate relevance, I think, is how clearly it lays out this tension between aggressive political rhetoric, specifically this retribution theme, and established democratic norms and institutions.
That feels key.
It really is. Regardless of whether the full structural shift pans out exactly as Karl predicts, his reporting provides a stark look at how deliberately institutions were targeted based on political loyalty, not just policy disagreement. That distinction matters, I think, for anyone trying to understand the pressures on governance today.
So the blueprint itself is significant.
I think so. Whether or not this specific team fully achieves its new world order, the detailed planning Karl describes, the focus on bureaucratic control, that becomes a potential playbook for the future, doesn't it? And that could be seen as a structural change in political strategy itself. Hashtag tag outro.
Okay, so let's quickly recap our deep dive into Karl's book. 3 main things stand out, I think. First, the core argument. This campaign wasn't just a win, it was engineered as a structural shift, with things like Schedule F planning as evidence.
Right. Second, the driving force behind that shift was this powerful, unifying rhetoric of retribution, aimed at dismantling perceived obstacles.
And third, The whole story relies heavily on Karl's insider access, which gives us details but also comes with potential biases we need to keep in mind.
And we did pull out some fascinating details, didn't we? From how the assassination attempt supposedly reshaped the inner circle to the focus on this New World Order team mapping out how to control the government from within.
Definitely. So we'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. Karl published this in late 2025, outlining the intents and the early moves. How long do we actually need to wait? Is it a full presidential term? A decade? Before we can say definitively whether this was just a really dramatic political moment fueled by intense rhetoric, or if it truly marked a permanent structural change in how America is governed. That's the big question Karl leaves us with. Thanks for joining us.
Grab Retribution: Donald Trump and the Campaign That Changed America, by Jonathan Karl, now on sale $23.95. Don't miss this chance and build good habits and achieve remarkable results. Buy now today.
Like and subscribe for more Bookhaven podcasts.